Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
These guys are hammers, and to hammers everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, and we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. What good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor, and she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared complete loss.
Be prepared for anything. Our war has just begun.
We are the hammers, and we are the nails. The world stands upon the precipice of total insanity, and we need you, and we hope you need us, bringing information, news, and as much truth as we can eke out before Mother Nature turns us to crumbs. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, working to become millions of voices singing in unison to bring the sanity back home.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to
your host.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Now Radio, listener-supported radio where no topic is taboo, and your support keeps it that way. Brought to you by Revolution Radio, listener-supported radio where information never sleeps. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is going to be PHILLIP HOPERSBERGER, and I probably might have that pronunciation a little bit off. I can let him correct me a little bit because I'm new to making it. At any rate, I got to tell you, I've been reading this man's book since actually night before last, and I've gotten all down but about 40 pages of it, and you folks might want to look into reading this guy's book. I would class it up there, Cloak and Dagger book, good suspense, right along with the Da Vinci Code, minus maybe the revelation that Christ was a father that left children behind. But other than missing something like that, fantastic read. It'll help you pass the time of day, give you something to enjoy, and who knows, might even give you a few ideas. So, PHILLIP, how you doing today?
Very good, very good. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Now, also, one more thing I wanted to mention to everybody. Don't forget, like I said in the intro, Talk Now Radio and Revolution Radio are both listener-supported. Your donations do help keep the sponsors out. It wasn't that long ago on my show over at Talk Now Radio, I was interviewing the lady Tia Lesson about Charles Koch brothers and their the way they've been funding these little projects for the Republicans, helping to change their law. And she was telling me that their movie was banned in, I want to say it was the UK, if I remember correctly, because of its material. And, you know, the Koch brothers had bought off the theaters there, wouldn't let it in, or at least some of them. So, you know, your support does definitely make a difference when it comes to certain shows that has certain topic matter that there are parties out there would rather not have the public hear it. At least by doing this, it makes it where we're not likely to be bought by the people like Charles Koch. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to explain that to everybody real quick, PHILLIP. Now, coming back to you now on the book, like I was saying earlier, excellent read. I've really been enjoying it. I'm going to enjoy the last 40 minutes before I go to bed tonight. I mean, 40 pages before I go to bed tonight. I got to find out how this thing ends in the final analysis. Got to find out what that relic is that archaeologists found that you withheld the information on until later on toward the end of the book. What role exactly the Noah Nephilim actually is playing in this and his history. I got some suspicions about that one. So I got to kind of can't wait until 3 o'clock so I can go back to it, in other words.
Good.
So why don't you give us a little information here about, you know, what motivated you to write this book?
Sure. I'll go with the HOPERSBERGER pronunciation first. You were close. And as I told you before, my name gets butchered all the time. So HOPERSBERGER, hamburger, anything close. But technically it's HOPERSBERGER. You
said that 3 times to me at least, and I still didn't catch the Hooper versus Hopper until just now. I wonder why you repeated it 3 times, because I had said it wrong at least 2 more times.
No big deal. I get butchered all the time. I learned to fight as a kid at a really young age with that name.
Yeah, but at least it wasn't Sue.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Xposure is the name of the book. I wrote this, I haven't told you this before, but I wrote this about 10 years ago. And I had an idea, kind of a Tom Clancy meets the X-Files sort of story. The lead character is a Navy SEAL, which is inspired by my brother-in-law, who's a SEAL. Retired now. He teaches kindergarten, if you can believe it. Go from killing guys with a hot dog 6 different ways to teaching 5-year-olds.
That's something to keep the kids in line.
Yeah, and when I mocked him about it, he said, "You'd be surprised what the similarity is between teaching kindergartners and training SEALs," which is what he did. He trained Navy SEALs as a SEAL. But anyway, I wrote this about 10 years ago, and Random House got real excited about it. Interesting story. A girl I knew in our church asked to read it. When you're writing a book, everybody says, "Oh, let me read it. And, you know, usually they're like your mom. It's the greatest thing that's ever been written. or they know absolutely nothing about writing and they criticize you, erroneously. So she bugged me to read a few chapters, and I reluctantly sent her a couple. And I didn't know it at the time, but she was working for a PR firm in Nashville, and she had forwarded it to a friend who worked for Random House. And they got really excited about it, and they contacted me and said, we wanted to read the rest of it. I said, it's not done. I've only written 10 chapters. We don't care. Send it to us. We want to see it. This is great. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm thinking my dream is coming true as an author. I'm going to be published, and I didn't even lift a finger to do this. It was just kind of God. And so anyway, they read it. It got past the editor, the acquisitions editor, the other editor, got into the marketing committee, and they nuked it. They declined, and I was crushed. So they declined because they had just purchased a similar property that was very identical, kind of a UFO alien kind of story, and they didn't think they could promote two books with the same kind of topic, so they declined, and I was just devastated. So I put it in a drawer, and I didn't touch it for 10 years. But I had, I guess a year ago, I had two old college buddies had read a couple chapters, and they loved it. And they said, "Can we buy this?" And I said, "No, it's not done. It's just sitting there." And they said, "Well, put it together, sell it. Self-publish it." Self-publishing is a big deal now. You can do it easily, a lot harder 10 years ago. So I did. I finished it and put it out there on Amazon, and did pretty well. And they were pretty excited. And so, as you know, I just had it on Amazon for 5 days for free just to promote it, and got almost 4,000 downloads. So that was pretty cool.
Of which I was one of them. I couldn't wait to get a free copy.
Yeah, it kills you to get it for $2.99 as an ebook, huh?
Well, actually, believe it or not, it really does. I'm like $600 in overdraft at the bank.
Well, I'm glad I could help you out with that. Enjoy it. I hope the last 40 pages don't disappoint you and you nod off.
No, actually, I don't think it will, to be honest with you. But I was going to say, it's a really huge compliment to have Random House want to pick up on it. They're the biggest publishing firm out there, and they're very selective about what they want to put on their shelves.
Yep. It was. I think when anybody starts writing, you have this dream. Oh, I'm going to be Mark Twain, or Tom Clancy, or James Patterson, or Stephen King, and you cannot even get a publishing house today to look at a manuscript unless you have an agent, and even then, it's almost impossible. Everything is constricted. Amazon has changed the world with Barnes & Noble's closing and Schuler Books and things like that. So it's really, really hard. So for me to get them contacting me, and they actually chastised my friend that she didn't tell them about me sooner. And so that was very, it was kind of a miracle thing. I was just floored.
Well, with today's technology being what it is, do you think it's really necessary to have to go through a publishing company? I mean, Isn't that more of a luxury item nowadays? Yep,
it actually is. If there's if you have listeners out there that have a story they want to tell, you need to be able to write. Anybody, as I told you earlier, anybody can write, but to write well, and I'm not claiming that I do, but to write well, you really need to be mentored. You really need to attend writers' conferences, read some books, practice, get stuff out there that people can criticize and edit. But yeah, you're right. Self-publishing today is the way to go. Anybody can publish anything. And if you go look at the top 100 Kindle ebooks on Amazon, they have 100 free every day and 100 that are for sale. And 90% of them are, at least from the covers, are pretty trashy. So I think anybody could write anything these days and get it self-published. It's not expensive.
Well, I have noticed here in the recent times that grammatical errors inside of books is becoming more and more commonplace, in other words.
Yeah. You catch any in my book?
No.
Good.
The only thing that I had noticed was when you first introduced knowing the film was that the spelling was different, but I kind of could tell from the way the story was going was that was intentional.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm talking about the other kind of errors where you can tell they're not intentional, and you're like, "Oop, I see that writer had a oopsie."
Yep, happens all the time. So, again, self-publishing is very easy to do. If your, listeners want to write a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you can easily do it, and it's not expensive. You could get it done for $300-400.
Well, real quick, let me let everybody know that if they want to know more about you, they can go to www.totallyrighteouscopy.com. And I notice you don't spell righteous the way it's normally spelled here. It's spelled WRITEUSCOPY.
Right.
And in fact, I'm going to put that link in the chat room so it'll be easy for everybody to just click on it. And when you folks get to his website, you're going to see that this here book is just one out of at least 2 projects, if not more, he's got going on right now. He's also working on a video called Something Gray. And real quick, since I'm tantalizing him, why don't you give him at least a kind of a brief introduction to Something Gray?
Sure. Something Gray is a screenplay that I wrote 2 years ago. It's based on the true life story of John Singleton Mosby. Back in the 60s, there were 2 television shows about Mosby, M-O-S-B-Y, one by Disney. Kurt Russell was in it. And then the other one was, I'm not remembering the guy's name right now. It's Lee something, but they were both television shows that were on in the 60s and obviously not anymore. But Mosby is just an amazing guy. I mean, totally amazing. If you saw the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson, it was kind of loosely based on the idea of Marion Fox, the Swamp Fox during the American Revolution. And in the Civil War, these guys were just one generation removed for their grandfathers having fought for Washington. Mosby was a guerrilla fighter behind enemy lines, which was actually in Virginia, his home state. But he wreaked havoc with the Union. He totally disrupted everything they tried to do, and that was his whole scheme. And he was called the Gray Ghost because he would hit and disappear, hit and disappear, hit and disappear, and disrupted communications, blew up trains, attacked wagon trains, supply lines, just an amazing guy. And I'm kind of a history buff, Civil War, American Revolution, World War II. And, I was reading about Mosby, and I thought, this guy's amazing. This is really a movie. And I'd never written a screenplay before, but I thought, what the heck, I'm going to give it a shot. So I did. I wrote a screenplay about it, and amazing guy. And I entered it in some contests, and it did really well in 3 of the major contests in Hollywood, top 10 or 15%. And I thought, that's pretty good for a first-time attempt at a screenplay. But Hollywood's a very closed community and very tough to get anything sold, especially if it's a period piece where, it takes a lot of money with train wrecks and horses and soldiers and cannons and explosions. They'd rather make cheap movies like The Hangover that's potty humor that costs 10 or 20 million and makes 600 million instead of something like this, like Spielberg's Lincoln. It took him about 10 years to get that made, and he's got the name to get it done and the credentials. So anyway, after I kind of ran its course with querying Hollywood and contests and stuff, I turned it into an ebook and put it on Amazon also. And when you go to my website, totallyrighteouscopy.com, you can see the trailer that I made for this ebook. This script is now an ebook on Amazon. I made it really cheap. It's only $2.99. Hopefully Tom Hanks or Ron Howard or Spielberg will see it and they'll want to buy it and turn it into a movie. But there's a trailer for it and also a trailer for Xposure. So that's the gist on Mosby.
Okay.
Something Gray.
Now go ahead.
I was just going to repeat the title. It's called Something Gray.
Alrighty. Now, coming back to your book, I'm not sure how much of it you're really willing to put out on the air without giving away the candy store, so to speak. But why don't you give everybody kind of an outline of what to expect in the book?
Sure. Yeah, you don't really want to give it away. It's kind of like, what do they call that with a movie when you expose the plot line?
A spoiler?
Yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, I don't want to give away the whole story because then you wouldn't enjoy the book, and that's part of the fun is turning the page and finding out what happens next. But in general, it's an end times kind of a story setting. The lead character is he's almost retired Navy SEAL, and his name is Stan Stanislaw. And Stan has changed his mind about being a sleeper agent. He's lived in the United States his whole life. raised by his parents who were communist sympathizers from World War II. And his whole life, he's been set up to be this sleeper agent to topple the United States. And at the last minute, he begins to have second thoughts. And as a result, he becomes kind of a man without a country. So in the course of his kind of being in between the Soviet Union and the United States and the CIA, he discovers a plot that's bigger than the one he was planning. And that's kind of what he exposes. And that's where the title comes from, Exposure. So it's kind of a Tom Clancy meets X-Files, UFOs, aliens, all the great stuff.
Yeah, I noticed that you wanted to incorporate in this here a little bit from the old Anunnaki of Sumerian lore, as well as the grades of today's lore.
I'm not familiar with that. What do you mean the giants?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you may not have heard them referred to as Anunnaki.
No, I have. I've heard it pronounced different ways. When you said Sumerian, it threw me a curve.
Oh, okay.
I think I'd give the nod to the Hebrews on nailing that one first, all the way back to Noah. But yeah, one of my favorite stories in the Bible as a kid was David and Goliath, and it's funny that it's every kid's great story. You got this giant who's going to slaughter these people, and this kid knocks him out with a stone. But a lot of people just kind of glance over that and don't realize that the Old Testament is loaded with references to Goliath, his brothers, which is why David picked up 5 stones and not just one, because he knew if he knocked out Goliath, he had to deal with his brothers. But there's a lot of references in the Old Testament to giants and the Nephilim and the Anakim. Pretty interesting stuff. That to me is fascinating. It makes the Bible a lot more interesting to read.
Yeah, I think it does too. I think it's really, so many people were trying to figure out Revelation in the end of time without knowing exactly what the story was on the Anunnaki back in the Old Testament. Kind of makes it hard to get a clearer picture, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is. I agreed. I mean, I think, if you were God and you wanted to communicate truth to your creation, you would make it clear and simple. And I think overall the Bible is pretty clear and simple. You can literally interpret a lot of it, but there's a lot of symbolism and there's a lot of stuff in Revelation, which, by the way, you pronounce correctly. A lot of people say Revelations, but there was only one revelation to John. But yeah, there's room for interpretation on how things are going to go down, but I think it's going to get clearer and clearer as we get closer and closer.
Now, the one thing I do notice, though, is, many of the old texts, not just the Hebrews, but Sumerian and Hittites, or, the surrounding areas, they all tell a story of those who descended from heaven, but you don't see much talk of it by the time you get into Revelation.
You're referring to the sexual encounter?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting observation. I think you're right there. I think what you're referencing is in Genesis 6, where the sons
of God, or the Nephilim, or the giants, they came down and made it with the women. And let's see, this is way back in the days of what was that? Jared. I was trying to think of his name, Jared. So it was even before the flood of Noah. It was way several hundred years prior to Noah. In fact, this is how far back this stuff goes.
Right. And yet there are references to it in the New Testament. So, I think in Jude and is it 1st or 2nd Peter, they make reference to the angels and having left their domain and having sex with human women. Fascinating stuff. Very fascinating. And, Noah's flood was a significant event, if you take it literally, which I do, was a significant event to help clean the slate, I think, a little bit.
So how did you get the idea to incorporate the stories of the ancient Nephilim into your story about the suspense there about this here Navy SEAL guy?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer it without giving a spoiler alert. I'd have to think on it some, but I'll take a stab at it. I was a pastor for a long time, non-denominational, nothing weird, kind of Billy Graham-ish. And I did a lot of ministry and did a lot of, obviously, studying and reading of the Bible. And, it's one of the really cool stories in there. I remember my mom, I was raised in the Episcopal Church. My mom was our Sunday school teacher, and she used to always say, the Bible is a pretty cool book to read. It's got sex and war and, rapes and plagues and monsters and
betrayal.
Yeah, betrayal. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. And I kind of tucked that away, I guess. But as I got older and started reading the Bible for myself, it really was interesting because there's stuff in there that a lot of people don't even get. They gloss right over that. Somebody starts to read the Bible, they'll pick up the Bible and they'll start reading in Genesis, and they get into the who begot who and I begot him and the history of this and that king, and they blow it off. That's a mistake. You don't want to start in Genesis and just jump. There's a lot of really good stuff. So anyway, back to the answer. The Nephilim, the fallen angels, demons having sex with human women and creating offspring, that kind of blew my mind. That was like, wow, this is cool. This is,
Okay. I see why you didn't want to answer this and take a stab at it now. Okay, now that's me. The listeners hadn't read 130 pages to help put the 2 and 2 together, so it wouldn't ruin it for them.
Right. But anyway, it's interesting stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, and that studying the Bible and these stories in the Old Testament, David and Goliath, really kind of blew my skirt up. That was neat stuff. So I thought, this would make a great movie or a great book or a great story if we intertwine this with stuff that I like, espionage and Hunt for Red October kind of things and Navy SEALs. And then again, I mentioned my brother-in-law, getting to sit down with a Navy SEAL and ask him questions, that some he can't answer and some he can. But it's just fascinating. I mean, there's a whole nother life out there that most people have no idea of that Navy SEALs go through. And so it was neat to be able to utilize some of his experiences in writing the lead character as a Navy SEAL who is now a double agent and in a problem because he's being pursued by both countries.
Yeah, and right now he's not exactly sure which is more important to him, keeping his loved ones alive or saving his country, and he's not even sure he's trying to save his country.
Exactly, yeah.
So you got a guy that's torn in all kinds of directions and not even sure what directions he should be torn in.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
So yeah, that was pretty cool the way you did that, but you just got me to thinking, how much of your story plot did you get from your brother?
Oh, brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, I'm sorry.
None. Absolutely none. He was just a great guy to talk about what's it like to be a Navy SEAL. For instance, I asked him, when you're in a crowded area, you walk into an amusement park or a movie theater, so how do you think and look and react to what's going on around you? Fascinating. You and I walk into a movie theater or amusement park and things are crazy and busy and crowds and noise, and we just say, oh, it's busy and crazy now. Not him. He walks in and he looks at exits. Where's the point of attack? Where's the point of escape? Who's the threat? What person doesn't fit in here? And, things like that are just, you can't buy that stuff to get that kind of insight into a Navy SEAL's mind. And another example, he said a Navy SEAL, a real Navy SEAL, you would never know they're a SEAL. They have no inclination to want to show off, wear a Navy SEAL hat, T-shirt, stand out, flex, pretend like they've got a gun under their shirt. They're the guy that looks like Opie grown up from Mayberry RFD and Andy Griffith. I mean, they're just trying to blend in. They do not want to stand out. But if the crap hits the fan, that Navy SEAL is going to take charge and be right in the midst of whatever's going on, whatever threat is there, and eliminate it. So he had nothing to do with the story. He was just influencing me on who I wanted to have as the protagonist.
So, yeah, I would imagine that, given the kind of line of work they do, they have to pretty well be used to, being on the alert for those kind of things, as well as keeping them low profile, because when you're working undercover, you don't want to give yourself away.
Exactly. Yep. And as you know, Navy SEALs want to slip in and slip out. Nobody gets hurt unless they're told to hurt somebody. But normally they're doing reconnaissance and gathering information and setting up things for something that's going to happen in the future. But they do not want to be caught.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I noticed you seem to know quite a bit about it when you were writing the book. When I was reading the story, you were like putting, if I was to describe it, I'd say putting your brother-in-law in there as Stan Stanislaw himself, the way he talked and thought things out and, what have you, in other words.
Yep. And that's what you need to do when you're writing. You need to not think about how you think things yourself. You need to think about, how this person would do it. And dialogue is even tougher, especially if you're a man writing women, dialogue. Women do not talk the same way men talk, and they don't think the same way. And so, my wife was a big asset there, and I'd write something, and she'd look at, she goes, "There's no way that Tiffany would talk this way." I'm like, "Oh, all right. Thank you very much." But yeah, you're right. When you're writing someone else, you need to not think the way you think. You need to not use your experience and your, turn of a phrase or whatever. You need to think like somebody who's just spent 12 years in the Navy, swimming in North Korea's bay, unseen, in the middle of the night in frigid water. You need to think that way. You don't need to think like, "Oh yeah, I grew up in Detroit, and I went to high school and I went to college and I, went into the ministry and did this and that." Two different worlds, and you have to transplant that thought of that person, whatever it is, into your hand to make the words come alive on the page.
So basically, when you're writing these books, you have to actually turn into different people as you're writing their parts, so to speak, at least on a mental level.
Yep, exactly. You morph. You have to morph. And actors do that all the time, too. You read about Daniel Day-Lewis, stays in character. When he did Lincoln, he would go to restaurants or whatever between scenes, and he was Abraham Lincoln. If you approached him, you're going to get buzzard's guts, man. This stew is cold. It's not going to be, "Oh, thank you very much," and he's got an Irish accent or whatever English nationality is. Yeah, you got to get into the character. Actors do it all the time.
Now, I thought you did a really good job of it. I mean, the personality for Tiff was, much like you would expect from any reporter. The way you played off the role for that Mackinoff, and I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong, but you know who I'm talking about.
Macvica.
It was almost like he was just similar to somebody like Stan himself because of the similarity in their job focus, but yet you managed to give him his own unique key card, you might say it, at the same time, his own personality.
Yeah, thank you. That's high compliments. That means I succeeded. And, a lot of people probably don't know this, but writers are eavesdroppers. We make the TSA look lame because we sit around and overhear and listen to conversations all the time. If you're at a mall and you're having lunch with your kids while your wife's shopping or whatever, we're sitting there listening to what you say because we want to get real, authentic dialogue. And yet, it can't be the ums and ahs and all that kind of stuff. We take the gems, the little pearls of how you say things, the expressions you use. My mom was brilliant at old expressions. She would always say, if you lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. In other words, bring your friends home and let me see what they're like. Because when I see what your friends are like, I'm going to know what you're like. So, yeah, we are eavesdroppers. We're there listening to you all the time, trying to steal stuff we can put in our books.
And your mind's pretty much always geared toward looking around for new ideas, I guess you could call it, inspiration.
Yes, and good names like Royce. I've told you before. That is a tremendous name.
Yeah, you said that 2 or 3 times. I'm pretty sure I'm going to see it in a book somewhere down the road.
Oh, yeah, I'm using it. Royce is a great name. I've never met anybody named Royce. And, Rolls Royce. And what did you say the origin of that was? King? Is that what it means?
If you looked it up in a book of baby names, that's what I did. And it said it. Some of them say Conquering King. The other one says King.
Jeez, that's great. Yeah.
And actually, that was the original Roy, R-O-Y, but it still applies to Royce.
Oh, like Rob Roy in Scotland. Yeah, like Stanislaw. I told you earlier, off air, I swiped that name from The Great Escape from Charles Bronson's character. His name was Stanislaw, a very common Polish name. And Stan Stanislaw is of Polish heritage, which, back to my experience, I grew up in a Polish Catholic neighborhood in Detroit. And so I'm used to all that Polish kind of thinking.
Well, is it hard when you get ready to sit down and write a book, like say your suspense book there that we're talking about? Is it hard to come up with a name for the key character, or any of the characters for that reason? Or
no, not for me. I love that part. That's easy. And I'm usually that kind of thing I draw from my own experience, like, stealing your name down the road. This book, this book, Xposure, is a trilogy. This is the first book in 3. And so I've got 2 more books that I can weave Royce into somehow. So don't be surprised if you end up on a alien hit list somewhere in the 3rd book.
Well, I'm going to end up being an alien somewhere. I'll be trying to take over the world.
Yeah. Well, get in line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but, coming up with names is easy. I love doing that. There's so many great names out there. There's more names available that are unique. And you don't want to make it too corny where it's, Hank Stram, which may not be a good example. That's a football guy, but
stay away from Smith and Jones too, don't you?
Yeah, unless it's Smith and Wesson, then that works for roommates, as you know. That's a little inside joke on the book that nobody's going to get unless they read it. But yeah, there's a lot of great names. Dirk, gets overused, especially these trashy romance things. It's always Dirk is the masseuse guy that's seducing your wife.
I really kind of thought that Biff got overused.
Yeah, Biff, except in Back to the Future, Biff was perfect. What a great name for the loser, bad guy, bully, Biff.
Well, it seems like I've read so many novels and seen so many TV shows, especially these college shows, where you always got an athlete named Biff. And he's always a muscle-bound athlete, rich kid. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, definitely.
So, somebody seems to associate that name with that character, or a lot of people do it. And I guess it's because they've seen it so repeatedly in media, in other words.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, coming back to Xposure, I asked you the question the other day about, was this all just total novelistic, made up for entertainment, or did it also reflect your views about what you might see going on, but it's being put in novel format, in other words?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a damned if I do and damned if I don't answer that one, but I'll give it a shot. I think because it's a fair question. Yeah, there's a great deal of my personal theological theory involved in the plot of this book, no question. And I think that's true in just about anything you read, whether it's Stephen King or whatever. I mean, some things you write are totally fiction and you make them up. But yeah, I think there's a lot of truth, and I can't be dogmatic on this, but I think there's a lot of truth from my understanding of Scripture, theology, end time stuff. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think I'm right, but I think there's a lot of potential credibility in what I think theoretically on how things are going to go down.
Sort of like if you were to look at a set of different manuscripts about the end of time, and you knew that one of them would probably be more accurate than the rest of them, you could pick years out of any of the 10 or 15 laying in front of you, and it would be just as good as any one of the other thoughts about it, in other words.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think but I wrote the book to be entertaining. I mean, I'm not trying to proselytize anybody. I think I don't know if that's exactly true. I would love to proselytize everyone. I mean, I think Christianity's true. But that's not the point of writing the book necessarily per se. The reason I wrote it was to entertain, was to take some theories that I have and make an exciting story out of it that would make you go, whoa, that's cool. I did not see that coming. I did not expect that. I've never thought that way before. This is new. I'm going to have to check this out. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to entertain, but if it makes somebody crack open a Bible and go, really? Seriously? That's in there? I didn't know that. Then that's good. I'll take that. That's the cherry on top of the sundae.
I'm not sure, but I think I remember telling you, or it was somebody else I was telling, it might have been Tim Ward, that me personally, I'm pro-God but anti-religion type person.
You're in good company. That's where Jesus is. And me. Yeah, religion gives God a bad name. There's no question. Yeah.
Which would be all the more reason to not want to proselytize, say, for the church per se, rather than to proselytize for God.
Yeah, when Paul was before, I don't know, you can help me with this, was it King Agrippa or somebody? He was giving his defense in Rome with his head on the line, literally. And he said, yeah, you're like trying to convince me. And he said, if I could, I'd convince all of Rome. I mean, I am trying to influence. There's no question. That's what salt and light does, is it influences taste and darkness. So, yeah, but you're right. I mean, Christians, I shared that movie with you, The Hiding Place, came out in the 70s, I think, with Julie Harris and some other big stars. Story, but kind of like a Anne Frank kind of story, World War II concentration camp. But it's a true story, and it's based on Corrie ten Boom and her experiences in the Netherlands. And her father, I thought, had a great line. I've adopted it my whole life as one of those life quotes. He was supporting, they were Christians, they were supporting his Jewish neighbors who were being taken off, and labeled and wearing the gold cross. And there was a fellow Christian friend of theirs who was just aghast that he would stand with the Jews. And his kids couldn't believe it. Corrie ten Boom and her sister just couldn't believe that this Christian supposedly wouldn't support the Jews in being taken off to these concentration camps. And Corrie ten Boom's father said, they're questioning whether this guy's really a Christian to not be supportive also. And Corrie ten Boom's dad said, just because you put a mouse in a cookie jar doesn't make him a cookie. And I think that's classic. Just because you say you're a Christian doesn't make you a Christian. Jesus was very clear. If you're gonna say you're with me, then imitate me.
And just because you take a demon and stick him on a church pew doesn't make him a Christian either. Yeah, I mean, I've known a lot of Christians that I wouldn't hang out with, but a lot of people that aren't believers, they're a lot of fun. One of the best guys I fished with, he did a lot of fishing in Pennsylvania. He wasn't a Christian, but he was a blast. Man, what a great guy to be with. So, I mean, he was genuine and honest and, swore left and right and cracked me up and threw his rod in the water when the trout took his fly. I mean, there's a $400 rod. He's throwing it down on the rocks. I'm just standing there laughing. Just because you say you're a Christian doesn't make you a Christian. Reminds me of my brother-in-law Chance. Every time I see him, he's always talking about, what I like about you? You're real. Yeah. And then one day, my kids had gotten into some trouble, and I was, doing my little multitask thing, getting everything ready for the Thanksgiving dinner, and Chance's over for Thanksgiving dinner. And when the kids started getting out of line, I started shouting at them while I was still cooking at the same time. Didn't care, who I was listening and how I was saying it, and wasn't trying to be politically correct or anything like that. And he just walked by and smiled and said, "Yep, you're real." Yeah, well, being genuine is what it's all about. I mean, we're all losers. I mean, let's face it, every single one of it. The Bible calls it a sinner, but we're all losers. We all screwed up. One beggar showing another beggar a piece of bread. But, true Christianity, I think, is being what Jesus was. And that's loving people and loving God. Being an example. Yeah. I mean, I obviously have convictions. There's things I think are sin and things that aren't. But God wants us to love people. So hopefully they'll love Xposure, and I'll kill two birds with one stone, so to say. Well, you said you was going to write some more Xposure books. Are these going to kind of like be a continuation of the story to its completion, or? Yeah, when you get to the very end, when you turn the last page tonight, hopefully you can read Greek, but if you can't, when you get to the last page, you're going to go, "Oh man, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" So you're going to tick everybody off at the end of your book and leave them wanting more. Yeah, I mean, it's a 3-part story, and so when you finish it, you're going to be like, "Okay, where's the second book? Don't leave me hanging here. What's the deal?" Yeah, so Stan has 2 more books to go, and now I got to work in Royce somehow. So, when do you think your next book's going to be out? That's a good question. It might be a little while, because right now I'm working on a screenplay, a comedy on the Detroit Lions. They're my
favorite football team growing up in Detroit, and they suck. They've sucked for years. They've sucked since the 50s. In the 50s, they were great. And other than Barry Sanders and some little pops and whistles in the last couple of years, they just have not made the playoffs. So they're kind of like the Chicago Cubs of football. There's a lot of fun to be written there. So I've got that in the works. I'm also doing some new work that I can't talk about. I told you a little bit about it off the show here, but that's in the works too. And then I've got something. Then I'm going to be doing some work for a major Christian organization that wants some writing done. So Xposure, the next book, is probably on hold for a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to have to shape our teeth and wait.
That's a great expression. Hang on a minute, I want to write that down. Shape your teeth.
I don't know. I just come up with it all the time.
Sounds good.
Bite her lip and wait, I guess you could call it. I don't know. Yeah. So, let's see where that leave us. So, but when you say it's going to be a while, it's going to be at least a year?
That's a good question too. Yeah, I would say that's probably about right. It's hard to figure out how soon I'll get this screenplay done on the Lions, and then I've got some work I got to do where people actually pay me to do it. So yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, I should say, if somebody goes looking for Xposure on Amazon or anywhere else, it's spelled Xposure. It's not the regular traditional EX Xposure. It's just the letter X, like X-Files. And
of course, it's called Xposure because the star of the book is all about exposing an evil plan that's imminent to the world, so to speak.
That's right. Yep, exactly.
So when we get to the end of this here book, the world's still going to be in danger.
You're dang right it is, just like today. Yeah, I think I'll piss you off when you get to the end. You'll get right to the end, read the last line, and go, oh, man, I'm calling this guy. It's 3 a.m. I'm calling him. I'm going to wake him up, tell him what I think of that. Hopefully.
Well, don't feel like you cornered the market on cliffhangers now. Don't think that at all. You know, Jesus did it 2,000 years ago when he said he'd come back in 2,000 years or more.
Yep. Yeah, we're hanging on that cliff for sure. Wait, what if he comes back right this minute? That's going to ruin. Oh well.
Then nobody will get to find out the ending.
There we go.
Can you take it to heaven with you when you go?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Or can you read it from up in heaven?
Now, that's a good theology question. Is my dog going to be there? I don't know. That's another good one.
That's something else that I had to admit that I noticed in your book. You got a professor that's teaching theology in there, but yet he doesn't seem to stick to the traditional dogmatic fundamentalism of the Bible.
Yeah, how about that? Kind of nice, isn't it? Refreshing.
Yeah, that is kind of nice. So I take it that it was important to you that this guy was, shall we say, more flexible?
Yeah, a little bit. And also it leaves a little room for people to go, wow, so what exactly does he believe? And, all press is good. Even bad press is good. So if somebody who's a fundamentalist hates me for that, that's great. Write an article about it. Put it on the New York Times front page. That'll sell books. But yeah, I've always steered clear of titles as a Christian. Like fundamentalist. You might as well say you're a traveling car salesman or something. That's just a terrible name. I've never used the term fundamentalist, although I've always thought I like to have fun, and I think a lot of those guys are just mental. But Christianity should be fun. If it's not the right answer, if it's not fun, we shouldn't be doing it. I mean, if it's not God's plan. So yeah, I made the professor's Gillum Jeffries. I made him more human, I think. And there's another good example of stealing a name. That name Gillum, I stole from the Shootist, John Wayne's last movie with Jimmy Stewart. Gillum was Ron Howard's character, and Humphrey Bogart's wife was his mom in real life, Lauren Bacall. So I thought, Gillum, what a great name. So I made the professor's name Gillum Jeffries.
So you're a little something of a movie buff. You're pretty well versed on stars and what they played in and etc.
Yeah, I really do love movies. I mean, I grew up loving movies, and that's why I wrote the screenplay too for Something Gray. I just thought, I'm reading Mosby's life, and I thought, this is a movie, man. This guy, he did some astounding things, and I just love old movies. Well, two of my favorites, Arsenic and Old Lace with Jimmy Stewart, and It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. Both of them won all kinds of awards. Both Frank Capra movies, like most people are familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, or You Can't Take It With You, or Mr. Deeds, or what was that? I think that's right. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But yeah, movies are great. When I write visually. I see it. As I'm writing, I'm seeing what's happening, and sometimes I can't keep my fingers up with what I'm seeing in my mind. So
it'd be like you're watching a movie on a TV, but it's happening inside of your mind.
Right, exactly. And when you're reading Exposure, I'm hoping that you can visualize what I'm visualizing. Like the scene there about turkey hunting. Hopefully, if you've never turkey hunted, which seems like it's not really part of a UFO end of the world kind of movie, but it is. If you've never turkey hunted, which I've done for many, many years, hopefully you were transported into that experience of sitting there waiting for this massive gobbler to come within range of your shotgun.
Well, it would really be kind of hard not to visualize that, the way you went into specific detail about the sitting position and every little, minute detail. It would be kind of hard not to grab a visual.
Good. Then I succeeded again. Thank you, sir. Very kind. Very kind. You love movies. I really do. Movies are terrific. The older the better in a lot of ways. The old movies are really good, but there's a lot of great ones that have been the more recent times. Shawshank Redemption. That movie is nearly perfect. They say the best screenplay ever written was The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. That was just classic. But Shawshank Redemption, that or Silence of the Lambs. Great structure in that movie. What a tremendous wrap-up movie. Those two are great. But the old ones really kind of tripped my trigger, especially, again, Arsenic and Old Lace, if you've never seen it. Hilarious with Cary Grant. And It Happened One Night with Clark Gable. Won all kinds of Oscars.
Oh, and you know what? I meant to tell everybody live that didn't see it in the chat room earlier that I was supposed to have Kenneth Paulson today talking about the Gospel of Forbidden Truth. And, well, he had sent me his books, wanted me to read it before the show. And, well, it didn't get here till last night late, and naturally I didn't have time to read it, so me and him rescheduled it, and that's why we're talking to Philip here instead of Kevin. But going back to the other part, you're talking about all these classic movies. One of the things that struck me as a classic, I don't think it did anybody else, was the outlaw Josie Wells. Did you ever happen to catch that one?
Oh, yeah. When he spits the tobacco juice the dog's head. Or the Indian. He goes, people have been sneaking up on us for years. Yeah, that's a great movie. A lot of good lines in that. I'm big on picking out good lines, memorable quotes from movies. And, obviously The Princess Bride probably takes the cake on most memorable lines. But Outlaw Josie Wales, that's got that Indian in there. He's got a lot of great lines.
You mean that really old coot of an Indian?
Yeah, where the Indian squaw is beating up on top of him, and Josie pulls her off, and the old guy's laying there, and he says, "Good thing you stopped her. I might have killed her."
I like when Josie Wells comes up behind her with the, I think he had the gun on that other Indian girl, and she says only an Indian can sneak up on you like that. And the other Indian stuck up behind Josie and stuck the gun to his head and said, "Yep, that's what I figured. Only an Indian," or something. I mean, I haven't seen it in years, but I'm sure you know the part I'm describing.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yep.
All right, have you ever heard of the Missouri boat ride?
Yeah, where he shoots the line. Yeah.
And they went through the little spigot about how did he know which guy was going to draw the gun first. And I think all of that just made this, join together, combine together to make it what I thought was a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and if folks are into reading scripts, screenplays of movies, you can do that. True Grit, the new True Grit, written by the Coen brothers, that is almost a classic story. You start reading that, you can visualize everything. It's really, really, it's even better than the movie in some ways, because you're reading it and you're seeing it in your own mind, which is priceless.
Of course, you have to kind of get used to reading scripts because, well, this may have just been this one film producer, but he had sent me a script that he had been working on, and it interrupted in various places with instructions on what angle he wanted the camera at, in other words.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That's a shooting script. There's two kinds of screenplays. There's a shooting script that they will actually use on the days of production, and that has camera angles and all kinds of stuff like that are directions from the director. And then there's a regular screenplay that doesn't have any of that is called typically a spec script, speculation script, and that's what Something Gray is. Something Gray is a script I wrote to sell to Hollywood, whoever wants to buy it, and then they would they chop it up by the days of production. So you have all the shots at one setting. Here, economically, it pays better to do all your shots and all your setup for that week in Kansas, and then the next week, and so they have all those directions in there. Something Gray is just a regular screenplay. If you bought it and read it, it just reads like a story. And True Grit is that way too. But if you read the shooting script, that's very annoying. You're right. Camera angles and all that. That's very annoying.
Okay, now Something Gray, is that already for sale at Amazon?
Yeah. Yep. Amazon has it for $2.99 as an ebook, and it's going to come out in print probably in a couple of weeks. Here, it'll be also available in print. Right now, it's just an ebook, and I should say, folks should not be turned off by ebooks. You can get a free application at Amazon that you can read any ebook on any device, computer, whatever.
And with that, folks, we're going to go to break, and don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after these messages.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, I'm Benjamin.
And I'm Jasmine.
We are inner tour guides with black belts in the art of self-awareness and how to live a passionate life.
We love talking with you about what you have and what you want.
More importantly, we want to explore with you how to bridge the gap between that wanting and bring it right back to the having.
So what are your hopes, dreams, and desires?
Is it money, love, success, health, wealth, or something even more specific?
Let us guide you through the exciting adventure of turning what you want into what you have.
Come join in the conversation on our show, The Inner Revolution.
We look forward to exploring with you.
The finder of lost children and missing persons. Monique Lassan. Surveilling civil and criminal investigations. I investigate.
No, I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child.
Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own Eye Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. What is your destiny to find the golden child?
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not
real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
He wants a challenge. Let's give him one.
The voice that whispers in your ears are the screams that you fear. The mind you cannot defy is the heart that rules mankind. The people who made you are the gods that will save you. I am Steve Travesty. I am the voice. The ghost in the machine. Ghost in the Machine. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Studio A.
Right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, everybody, we're back now. One quick reminder, don't forget to support Talk Now Radio and Revolution Radio. Help keep us bringing this information to you. Sometimes it's novels, sometimes it's political, sometimes it's historical, but we always try to bring you the most recent and most accurate information available at the time that we are able to find at the time. Sometimes it comes looking for us, but you get the idea. So, Philip, are you still with me?
I am, sir.
Just wanted to make double sure I didn't lose you during the break time there.
Nope.
Now, we know that we've talked about something gray and about exposure. Maybe now you'd like to tell us about some of the other projects. Because I got the impression, talking to you on Facebook, that you've got many, many, many irons in the fire.
Yeah, I do. That's a biblical principle, right? From Ecclesiastes. Yeah,
Talk about burning both ends at the middle.
No, it's what is it? I think it's in chapter 4. I'm not positive about. Just King Solomon talks about a wise investor has a lot of different things going, so that if one craps out, the other ones are still good. Yeah, I'm going to be doing. Well, I guess I'll start in the past a little bit. I've written some sermons for PR packages for films for a company. And like, for instance, right now, the film America is out by Dinesh D'Souza. He did the Obama 2016 political movie a year or so ago. This is sort of a sequel, not exactly, but it came out, I think, 2 days ago here in Michigan, but supposed to premiere across the country on July 4th, tomorrow. But he made this movie, America, and it's basically countering Howard Zinn and Bill Ayers and other liberal guys who are kind of reinterpreting history to make Americans feel bad that we've done all these terrible things over the years. And, that's really just not true. It's not the whole story. The whole story is America is still an amazing country, and we may not be the best at everything we've ever done. We may have screwed up a lot of things, and we have, but the things that we've done positive, starting a country on an idea of liberty and trying to clean that up as we go is just amazing. I mean, the French imitated it and ended up, chopping off the heads of millions of people. Millions? I don't know if that's right, but thousands. And
I think millions is probably right.
Yeah, it probably is. Robespierre got it himself, even though he started a lot of it. But, Washington turned over the keys to the army. We had a peaceful revolution. That's really unheard of, and it's still going. But anyway, so the movie America, there are PR companies out there that will promote movies. And for the last, I guess, 2 years, I've written sermons that go into PR packages to churches to promote different movies, kind of like they did with The Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson or The Chronicles of Narnia. If a church wanted to rent out a theater for a night for the youth group or for the church or buy the film and show it themselves or whatever, just encourage their people to go see films that they think have good value, moral values, then they can get a free package of, bulletin inserts on Sundays, posters, study guides, discussion group questions, and sermons that they can use if they want, verbatim, or change it or whatever they want to do. And I've written sermons for several Christian films. I don't know if they're Christian films, but they're good films that your grandma and your kids wouldn't mind watching. So America is one of them. Just finished that. That's coming out tomorrow. A movie called Veil of Tears about the women in India who are being abused from a Gospel for Asia is the company that put the movie together. Very powerful movie, Veil of Tears. If you care about women, you'd be amiss not to go see this movie. Also, a movie came out at Christmas time called The Christmas Candle. It's kind of an angel, supernatural story, kind of a Pride and Prejudice, turn of the century, feel-good movie your wife would probably like more than a guy. But The Christmas Candle, wrote sermons for that. A big one that was just out recently was God's Not Dead. I wrote a 4-part sermon series on that. And that was a movie, I don't know if it's still in the theaters or not. It might be out by now, but about a college professor who's an atheist and a Christian student who wouldn't sign a document saying that God was dead. And so his professor challenged him to go ahead and prove to the class that God was indeed alive. Pretty interesting movie. Another one that hasn't been released yet called A Long Way Off, about the prodigal son story that Jesus told in the Gospels, which is my favorite story of parables. Another one that's coming out any day called Persecuted. So, yeah, been doing that. So it's kind of neat. You write a sermon and take truths from... I get to watch the movie ahead of time before it's released in the box office. Can watch it, extrapolate from that universal themes that you could build a sermon on to promote the movie. The Hollywood Reporter just interviewed me recently, a couple of weeks ago, about it. And working on another screenplay, like I said, about the Lions, the Detroit Lions, comedy. What else? Lions are always a comedy. And then I've got 2 more books to do here for Xposure to complete the trilogy.
Now, I want to remind everybody, if y'all got any questions for me or the guests, you call into Studio A at 347-688-2902. And I meant to say that earlier, and I got to talking, and Plum Smooth forgot. I'm not perfect. I'm just trying to be good.
Good.
So, at any rate, getting back to the story at hand, I'm kind of thinking you're the kind of guy that probably ain't going to be happy just writing Xposure in something gray when all that's through, you're probably going to have something else you're going to want to write about, aren't you?
Yeah, I think writers are always looking for the next big story, just kind of like directors and producers of movies. Yeah, I've got some things running around in my head, some World War II stories I'd like to do. By the way, today, Louis Zamperini died. He was 97 years old, World War II vet, ran in the Olympics in 1938 and shook Adolf Hitler's hand. Famous book, great book. If you want to read a good book, it's called Unbroken, about Louis Zamperini and his 2 years as a POW in the Japanese prison camps. Great story. He just died today. Tragic loss. But yeah, I've got some World War II stories I'm thinking about. You know, the thing that I always thought was kind of neat about Something Gray was that Mosby, as a Civil War colonel, he was just one handshake away from our generation. You know, our fathers, you know, fought in World War II. I mean, I'm in my 50s. I think you are too, Royce.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so our grandfathers, you know, were right around in between Civil War, World War I. You know, and the story with Mosby, that's something that kind of caught me, was that he was just one handshake away from, you know, our fathers. And it's a recent thing. And so World War II to me is still very recent. You know, we just had the, 70th anniversary of D-Day. The Civil War is right now at the 150th 4-year period. I was at Gettysburg a year ago today watching Pickett's Charge, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the third day at Gettysburg. Powerful stuff. You know, so to me, the stories that I'll probably be writing in the future, whether they're screenplays or novels or whatever, are going to have to do with history and probably the World War II. And there's some Civil War stories I'd like to do. The Irish Brigade, fascinating stuff. If you're at all interested in reading about Civil War and great stories of great men, the Irish Brigade, what was the movie that Daniel Day-Lewis did? Gangs of New York. That's set right in the Civil War period where the Irish were being, you know, looked down upon, kind of like we do today with other groups. The Irish were the losers at the bottom of the barrel, and that's why they joined the army, because it was the only place they could fight to prove that they weren't losers. And the Irish Brigade just did some amazing heroics. So, yeah, I've got a few more history ideas in mind, and also, you know, the whole idea of the end of the world, UFOs, the Exposure trilogy, I think there's a lot more there to say, and, well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So you're going to kind of, after Exposure, steer away from the paranormal UFO arena?
Yeah, just temporarily. I'd say I'm taking an exit off of the highway of what the heck to... You know, you got to pay the bills. You know, unless Exposure takes off and Random House calls me back and says, "Oh, we made a big mistake. We'd really like to take it back." Yeah, I want to do this comedy about the Detroit Lions. You know, they've been just a cursed team for 50 years. They've just been brutal. And I've got a lot of friends that are, you know, in Facebook groups that love the Lions, and we are just diehard crazy, just like the Chicago Cubs. You know, oh Lord, when is our day of getting out of Egypt? You know, we've just been in bondage to losing for so long. It's just, there's a lot of funny things to write. And I kind of like to get that one off my chest.
So when you catch some of that stuff up, you may want to come back, or you ever think about maybe looking into the conspiracy theory end of it?
Yeah, I definitely am going to come back and try to complete the trilogy for Exposure. Yeah, you know, conspiracy is great stuff. All, you know, ghosts and UFOs and time travel and, you know, all the coast to coast kind of cool stuff. There's just a lot of great stories out there, you know. Still, back to movies.
That's an idea.
What?
I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you said time travel and it clicked inside of my head, because I haven't seen it in this book, but you got 2 other books in the trilogy to go. Time travel might be an interesting twist to throw into them.
Oh, yeah, I definitely have that in mind. The whole, you know, I grew up on Star Trek and, you know, all the cool, you know, Lost in Space, Gilligan's Island, which is had a spaceman. But remember that really old movie or TV show, it's the theme song was "It's About Time, It's About Space, It's About the Human Race," and capsule drops down into these cavemen world. It's a comedy like Gilligan's Island. Do you remember that?
It sounds familiar, but I can't put my finger on it.
Well, anyway, time travel, Einstein, alternate existences and universes, and all the Twilight Zone stuff. Night Gallery. That's all running around in my mind. And the next 2 books on Xposure, I'm definitely thinking about. I can't give that away, but yeah, time travel is going to play a part of that. It's going to play a part of that for sure.
So I feel pretty sure, though, when this show's over, you're going to message me on Skype or Facebook and go, "Hey, dude, you keep tempting me to give this candy store away too early. Why don't you stop?"
I was going to say about movies, back to movies. One of my favorite scenes, talking about paranormal and all that, all the great fodder that's out there to make stories out of. In I can't think of it. The Bruce Willis movie about the dead people and the kid that sees dead people. Sixth Sense.
Oh yeah, I saw that one time back in the 70s, I think it was.
My favorite scene in there. My favorite scene is where the kid is seeing dead people and doesn't realize it until he does. But this one kid, a friend of his, ghost, comes down the hallway and says, "Hey, come on, I want to show you my dad's guns." And he walks away, and when he turns around, the back of his head's blown off. I was like, wow, was that powerful? That's pretty cool stuff. And I went home immediately and bought gun locks for all my guns and made sure to do that. But, there's a lot of good supernatural, spiritual, crazy, cool stuff out there, and conspiracy stuff, where there's smoke, there's fire, whether it's Area 51 and relates to my book, or whether it's JFK and all that stuff. There's smoke, there's fire. There's a lot of stuff going on out there that is not part of our world.
Well, yeah, somebody in every one of these cases had to have some reason to spark the initial flame, no matter how distorted it got over the millennia or the century.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I personally believe. There had to be something going on at the time that got it started.
Yeah, well, the thing that got me interested in becoming a Christian, I think most Americans think they're Christians because they're born here. It's kind of like Constantine turned everybody into Christians when he made Christianity an accepted Roman religion. But the thing that got my attention was I read a book in the 80s called The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey. And I'm not sure that all the stuff that Hal said was exactly true, but it got me thinking about eschatology and, the Antichrist and the end of the world. And I mean, that's some cool stuff. It really is. And that got me looking into the Bible and reading it and getting excited about prophecy. And, Hollywood has done a lot with that stuff, whether it's, Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist or The Omen. And, there's a lot of exciting storylines you can pull out of that whole end of the world eschatological stuff. And that's kind of somewhat what I did with Xposure a little bit.
Okay. Now, somebody in the chat room was saying that this book sounds interesting. They want to buy it. And I was sitting here half talking and half typing at the same time, giving them directions. For any of you listeners out there that want to buy this book, he has it in Kindle format over at Amazon.com. I would personally request, if you don't mind, that you go to my site, www.talknowradio.net, and scroll down below the chat room. You'll see the description of today's show with his picture, book cover, the whole 9 yards. And underneath the description, you'll see a link to his book over at the Kindle. If you click on it that way instead of going directly to Amazon, because I do get a small 2 or 3 cent commission off from it, but every little bit does help, me keep going.
That's terrific. Yeah, definitely do that. Don't go to Amazon. Go to Royce. We'll give you the Rolls Royce treatment.
You'll still end up over at Amazon, but this way it'll have my Amazon ID into the link, and they'll know to credit me for it, in other words. So just want to let you guys in the chat room are interested in buying this, and I'm really kind of glad to see so many people are interested in it, because I think you'll enjoy it. So
yeah, it's also in print, too. You can get a print copy if you don't want to read it on an ebook. Oh, that's what I was saying at our break. Amazon does have a free application that you can get and download on your computer. You can read any ebook you want for free. You have to buy the ebook unless it's free. But you can read any ebook on computer, phone, iPad, bottom of your teacup, whatever. Macintosh or PC, Apple, you can read any book you want for free. So you can get it as an ebook and something gray, both $2.99. But if you want it in print, both of those will be $10. Exposure in print's $10, and when something gray comes out in print in a couple of weeks, that'll be $10 too.
Yeah, the Kindle, Amazon's Kindle, they will let you download the Kindle program for free. And the beauty of the thing is, when you do get a book from Kindle there, whether you pay for it or whether it's free, it downloads right smack into your library, and it's ready for you anytime you're just click open Kindle, and it pops right up in front of you. It's very, very, very convenient. Also, I happen to know a lot of authors that use Kindle, and many of them do run these specials where they're actually giving their books away for free for a week, for a month, or whatever, trying to bait people, get them interested in them, and show them that they got something worthwhile. Let them try it before you buy it, type of thing. So, I ought to really look into investing in the Kindle, since it's just a time investment.
Yep. Yeah, and again, you don't have to own a Kindle. With that application, you can read an ebook on your computer.
Right. I mean, I got it downloaded to my laptop right now.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, I got his book Xposure folded up at the bottom of my taskbar bar, waiting to open at the end of the show. The last 40 pages. I'm going to get those out before I go to bed tonight, if it kills me.
Yeah, well, remember, we have an hour difference. If you finish at midnight, don't be calling me at 1 a.m. complaining about how I ended the story.
No, I would never, ever dream of doing something like that. I'd wait till 3.
Yeah, wait till 3, exactly. Give me a couple hours of sleep. Yeah, but remember that there's 2 more books to come.
Oh, I'm going to keep my eyes out. In fact, I was going to have you stay in touch with me, which I'm pretty sure that won't be hard for you to do.
Yeah, we are new friends. I enjoy you.
I kind of enjoy you, too. I think we've been getting along, hitting it off pretty good. Coming back to the cases at hand, though, you're an interesting fella. You and me have similar backgrounds. We both spent our tenure in church and both found the spiritual path to be more fulfilling, in other words. And we've both done a bunch of historical research on ancient religions and mythology and stuff like that. I think we've both actually drawn similar conclusions, too. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know you well enough to sit down and have a beer and chew the fat, as they say. But, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I grew up in the Episcopal Church, and it was dead as a doornail. I mean, my mom taught Sunday school. Our whole family was involved, Christmas pageants, altar boy, all that stuff. And when I got to be in my teens, I just realized, man, this is a waste. I could be home sleeping. But as you'll read, if you go to my website, you'll read my story, totallyRighteousCopy.com, and that's right, W-R-I-T-E, totallyRighteous.com, totallyRighteousCopy.com. My brother committed suicide, and that was a big deal. That got my attention, and that made figuring out the eternal very, very important to me, because, here's my best friend, my mentor, my big brother. He was a biker, leather jacket, cool guy, getting bar fights, and all the girls wanted him. He's just a James Dean. And all of a sudden he blew himself up in his car with gasoline in a bar in L.A., and he's gone. And, here I am now with his body looking, I'm like 16, 17. I'm looking into a coffin that is a body bag with my brother's scarred features staring back at me and thinking, where's my brother? Where's my brother? So, religion is a drag, no question. I mean, Nietzsche didn't like it. Lenin didn't like it. Jesus didn't like it. But it made me search and made me look. And like I said, eschatology, the whole end times prophecy stuff in the Bible, made the Bible a whole different book to me. And I decided to become a Christian. There was too much evidence not to do something with it. And that, I think is what it's all about. It's genuine. It's not, religion's a drag, let's face it. It doesn't deal with the question of sin. But
you got Christianity and you got church folk.
Yeah. Well, like we said earlier, Corey Ten Boom's dad. Just because you put a mouse in a cookie jar doesn't make him a cookie. And, you could go to church till they think you're the janitor. That's not what it's all about.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the history of the church going all the way back to the Vatican, the Protestants broke off from the, actually before the Vatican, the Protestants broke off from the church because they thought the church was wrong. Then when you get over here, it starts to divide into different groups because the Presbyterians think the Lutherans are wrong, the Baptists think the Lutherans are, the Presbyterians are wrong, the Pentecostals think the rest of those are wrong. You got a pattern of dissension in the ranks that goes back 2,000 years.
Well, yeah, and you know what? You need to go back even farther. You need to go back to where all the original Christians were Jews. I mean, the first Christians were Jews. They were, they were Hebrews. They were good Hebrew men and women, and they're the first ones. So, that's where it started, and I think it got messed up after that. Satan. The thing about Satan is the guy can't create; he can only copy. So he takes a lot of good stuff God's done and copies it and messes it up and makes it so confusing. You can transition from that right into the JFK conspiracy. There's so much stuff, you don't know who's trying to fool who anymore. What really happened, or is it just all people trying to make a buck? And it's so confusing, it's hard to sort out what the heck really happened. I mean, if you studied JFK, the 50th anniversary was just this past November, it's overwhelming. And, Satan does the same thing with Christianity. I mean, I think, the Bible is a solid document. No question. There's, 25,000 manuscripts compared to the next closest ancient manuscripts are, what's his name? Socrates? Not Socrates. Who's the guy?
Zoroaster?
Who am I thinking of?
Or Pythagoras?
Homer. Homer.
Okay, Homer. Okay.
Iliad, the Odyssey, Sophocles, Aristotle, those guys, just, 20 to 50 copies. And yet we discount the New Testament. It's got 25,000 ancient manuscripts that are within 99% accuracy. So anyway, getting off a little bit on my preaching pedestal, but Christianity, Satan messes it up, copies it up, confuses it up, and everybody starts thinking, religion's a drag. They just want to judge me and tell me I'm a sinner. It's not what it's all about. Not at all. Not at all.
Well, for me, Christianity is it's about a one-on-one relationship with the Creator and the individual that no preacher can teach, or no Sunday school teacher can actually teach or help you bond. It has to be nurtured between you and God.
Yeah, and like I said, my brother's death. When you're looking at your brother's face in a body bag, you start thinking, okay, that's his body. Where's his soul? Where's the guy I know that was so cool? And that got me searching. And religion wasn't the answer, but the answer is found in the Bible. And religion messes that up badly. But I think that's a ploy of Satan. He's trying to trick us, throwing so many things at us. We don't know if it was one shooter or Lee Harvey Oswald was a Cuban, whatever. And the more smoke there is, the harder it is to see the truth.
Yeah, that's why I like to call today's age a age of deception.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many out there. Nobody really knows for sure what happened at 9/11. Nobody knows for sure what happened to John F. Kennedy. Nobody knows for sure what the real deal was with the Pearl Harbor attack. There's conspiracy theories abound about that as well. There's conspiracies out there about the Titanic and how actually it was her sister ship, the Olympus, that sank, and it was an insurance fraud, and they bumped off three, big-time political leaders that was in their way.
That's funny you mentioned the Titanic, because my son, who's 23, came to me a couple weeks ago. He said, Dad, I got a new story for you. This is a great story. And he goes into the whole Titanic thing and how it was all an insurance thing. And, that is a great movie. That's a great story, true or false. But I think the gist of all that conspiracy stuff, whether it's Area 51 or, JFK, the more smoke you throw out there, the harder it is to find the truth, because everything seems so plausible until you read the next guy's deal. And I think that's what, in my mind, sets the Bible apart, that you can't change it. It's right there. You can study it. You can tear it apart. If you can disprove the Bible and disprove that there's an empty tomb in Jerusalem, the whole thing falls apart. It's not that hard to, get rid of the truth of Christianity. It all starts with the Bible. And, with Satan, I mean, he's throwing so many different religions out there, so many different things, so many different contradictions, so many this and that and da. You don't know what to believe. Man, the Bible's the source.
Yeah, and, you know, you and me would probably disagree on this here factor, but from what I've been known to study, and I've read like 7 different versions of the Bible. I had my own agenda at the time. The Bible is not totally 100% infallible, at least when you start looking at the many different versions that we have today that don't always match. You know, there's verses missing in the New International Version that was in the King James Version, just to give an example. We don't know what's different in today's Bible that might have been in the scriptures when they were originally assembled, in other words.
Yeah, we would disagree, but that's okay. I still like it.
Well, I mean, I think it's good to be able to disagree and agree to disagree peacefully.
Heck yeah. Yeah. And you don't have my address anyway, so you can't get me. So, one of the sermons I wrote for the movie God's Not Dead for the PR package, there was 4 sermons they asked me to write. One of them is called Is Our Faith Blind? And it's on my website under samples, and that's totallyrighteouscopy.com. Go there and read that, not necessarily you, but anyone. And the evidence for the Bible, just in that short sermon I gave, which is like, you know, a 30-minute talk in text, it's written down. It's just overwhelming. Like I said, 99% of it is accurately conveyed between 24,000 manuscripts, almost 25,000. And it's funny, but we always poke at the Bible, you know, or if tragedy happens, why did God do this? You know, there's another guy out there who we call Satan, who's very intent on screwing things up. But, you know, we don't question Sophocles or Tacitus or, you know, Homer's Iliad, and they have less than 50 copies, some of them less than 20 that they base this on. So, you know, the Bible has got some pretty solid stuff as far as credibility, and that's, you know, convinced me. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's good to be a skeptic. I mean, don't take my word for it. Go read the thing. But don't start in Genesis and start doing the he begot who and he begot. Read something good. Start in the Gospel of John. Figure out who Jesus is, because, you know, it all comes down to an empty tomb in Jerusalem and a book. That's it. Disprove either one of those, you're well on your way. But, you know, again, was there 1 shooter or 2 shooters? Was it Area 51? Was it empty? Was it, you know?
Yeah, everything's under controversy, pretty much.
Yeah.
So how did you come about this here name for your URL, the totallyrighteous.com?
Yeah, wasn't that stupid? I thought I was being clever. I told you before, I only look smart. Well, I always like, you know, the, what's the movie with Jeff Bridges? The dude, what is it? Just escapes me. Oh, The Big Lebowski. Not exactly a Christian movie, but, you know, he's just this kind of hipster doodle doofus guy, you know, kind of like Kramer on Seinfeld. You know, everything's totally righteous, dude. And so I thought, wow, that would be a, you know, as a Christian writing stuff, if it was totally righteous, which, you know, righteous, being a Christian, God sees you as righteous when your sins are forgiven. What if I had righteous with W-R-I-T-E as a writer? That would be kind of cool. And, you know, in my opinion, Bob Dylan is the greatest writer, songwriter of our age. You know, apologies to Mark Twain and Stephen King. But the greatest one in the past was Shakespeare. So I think Dylan and Shakespeare, Dylan's got a line in one of his songs, Shakespeare's in the alley with his pointed shoes and his pen, you know, and talking to some French girl who says she knew me well. So I made my company name Shakespeare's in the Alley. And so Totally Righteous Copy, I just thought I was being clever. And, you know, now, if you want to, you know, somebody to remember your name, you just need 2 letters, you know, like GM or whatever, you know, so.
Well, actually, I thought it was pretty clever, but I'm the kind of guy that I like to play around with words and the spellings and the soundings of them, just for humor and to mess with people's minds.
Well, good. At least I have one good follower. Yeah.
But there was something I was just fixing to say about that. Now my brain went all of a sudden.
Let me jump in there for you. See, you said, like, writers, like I said earlier in the first half of the show, writers are eavesdropping on you to steal good lines. You just said I was just fixing to. Just fixing to isn't something I say, but if I'm writing a Civil War screenplay, just fixing to, that fits perfect with the guy from Atlanta or Virginia or North Carolina. He's just fixing to. There you go.
Well, then I'll give you another one. Thought occurs to me.
Thought occurs to me.
Huh?
Well, I had one of my best friends growing up in Detroit. His grandparents were from Tennessee. Total hillbillies. Great people. And the grandfather would always, when he'd get upset, he'd say, "Shit fire." Nobody in my family said "shit fire." That was the first time I heard that. I just busted out laughing. What a great line! I think I even used it in Something Gray in my screenplay.
I think most people that are Christians say "shoot fire" and save the filthy rich. But I like the other one. I mean, it kind of reminds you when you've been eating Mexican food.
Yeah, there you go. So, have you read Something Gray yet, or are you just reading Xposure?
I'm just reading Xposure. I wasn't able to get to the free copy of Gray. It was already, past the date.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, I offered it for free in December, which was John Mosby's 180th birthday, and had almost 5,000 downloads. I was just astounded. The Civil War market out there, there's a lot of Civil War buffs, and they're really interested in it. And so, I'll have to let you know the next time it's for free. Otherwise, it's $2.99.
Okay. Well, then, too, if I get out of the overdraft into the positive again in the bank account, $2.99 won't seem like very much at that point in time.
There you go.
But at the same time, I was also going to ask you, with the coming into the last 20 so minutes of the show, is there anything you wanted to cover that I didn't think to ask about?
Well, that's awfully nice of you. Actually, I'm kind of interested in you. I don't know you very well, but like you told me about your name, Royce, the origins of that. I'd never heard that. Yeah, I don't think so. There's nothing I really want to, promote about me. I mean, obviously I've got a book and a screenplay and some other things I've done, and stuff coming out. So it's nice just to have a pedestal to kind of talk about me, but, nope. But I did want to ask you, though, your voice reminds me of J. Vernon McGee. I mentioned to you before, my mom as a kid, I would always hear her, she was blind, and she would listen to the radio, and she always listened to J. Vernon McGee. He was a Christian pastor, heavy Southern drawl. Not that you have one, but heavy Southern drawl. It's had a great, great sound. Have you ever heard of him, J. Vernon McGee? Did your folks listen to him or anything?
No, never heard of him till you mentioned him, but I always did think I had a really heavy Southern drawl.
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, he was, I think his thing was to go through the Bible in 5 years, maybe, at a radio talk show. Very, very popular. J. Vernon McGee. He's dead now. Well, his body.
Did J stand for John?
I don't know what it stood for. That's a good question. J. Vernon McGee. Very popular. I mean, he's kind of like a Billy Graham of the 60s. But on the radio, and his whole thing was you could listen to him, and he would go through the whole Bible in his radio broadcast, and you could go through the whole thing. I think it was 5 years, or maybe it was 3 years, but just had this wonderful Southern twang. You just thought, man, this guy, his ancestors were at Pickett's Charge. Terrific. And you've got the same kind of voice. You've got that home drawl going.
Well, I must admit I shared my amount of time in the Bible, amongst other things that I've read, but I haven't been, I do, do a lot of shows about the Bible and about ancient mysteries and end time scenarios and all of that, because it's such it's a fascinating subject, and because I actually happen to be one of the people that believes that there is something to these end time scenarios. Is it occurring naturally because God prophesied it, or is it occurring because man himself is bringing it to pass because they think it's supposed to happen?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's crazy. It's crazy. But
I think some people, they want their Bible to be so true, or their other ancient texts so true, so bad, they don't want somebody telling them later, you see, you were wrong, it never happened. So they try to fill in the gaps themselves so they don't have to hear how they were wrong if it don't happen.
Yeah.
Because it ain't happening fast enough to suit them.
Yep. Yeah, I think the gist of that is just, I think if you really want to know who God is and you really want to know truth, he'll make it clear to you. If you don't, he's not going to bother. I mean, he won't cast his pearls before swine. If you really want to know, he'll make it available. If you don't, he's not going to play games with you. God's very genuine. Back to the whole point of being genuine. You know, I'm not perfect. You're not. Nobody is. You know, we've accepted that.
I've had people tell me I was a perfect idiot more than once.
Well, shit fire. I just think if you really want to know the truth, God will make it available to you. He says that in Jeremiah. You know, people have asked me in the past, what about the pygmies in the deepest, darkest? Da, da, da? You know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a human being and you want to know the creator of the universe and you seek him, he says he'll let you find him. So whether it's, whatever you're looking for, you know, God will show you the answer.
I tend to agree with you on that one. I really do. I also tend to think that if you're the kind of person that you think you already know the answer, God's just going to let you go ahead and know what you already know.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's true. You know, blind leading the blind. But, you know, I think also, too, you need to, at some point, you need to accept that there can only be one answer to 2 + 2. And, you know, Jesus said very clearly, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say there's a bunch of different ways, there's this and that. You know, there is one answer. And it's not dogmatic or arrogant or elitist to say that, you know, the gospel's true and Jesus is a real person and is alive right now and he's coming back. If you can prove that that's true and that he said it. Only makes sense. You know, if God wanted to communicate truth, if you wanted to communicate truth to a bunch of ants, would you stand over them and yell and scream at them? No, you'd become an ant and you'd go talk to him and communicate it. Now, eventually your ant is going to get crucified on a really tiny cross. But the point is, yeah, I mean, if God wanted to communicate truth, you think he's going to make it difficult to understand if he really does love you? Absolutely not. That's Satan's territory. Confused.
Interesting concept.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know, though. It seems to me like if God really wanted you to know what his will was, and it was important enough and dire enough that if you broke it, you were going to die and burn in hell, that instead of leaving it up to so many men and so many religions and so many denominations to tell it so many different ways and make it so unclear, he'd come down there with a lightning bolt in his hand and say, this is the way it is, and this is what happens if you don't get it right.
Didn't he do that? Well, you know, it's funny. It's, you know, I don't mean to preach, but I was a pastor. But, you know, Jesus was funny when they, what was the situation? I can't remember the context, but he told the guy, I think they were asking him to do a miracle. And he said, look, if somebody rises from the dead, you still won't believe. And isn't that true? I mean, if he really did rise from the dead, man, 60, 70% of the world could give a rip whether he is or isn't, whether it's true or not or whatever. So I think, you know, a lot of people say, if he's true, come down right now and show me. But he did it already. And even if he did it, you still wouldn't believe. It's an act of faith. But, you know, faith isn't blind. Like I mentioned that sermon I did for God's Not Dead. There's evidence to believe that God's a real person and he cares and he sent his son. And there's options. I mean, you can get out of this crappy situation. This is not, it's like the Chronicles of Narnia. You know, I love C.S. Lewis. You know, Narnia, it's winter all the time without Christmas. That's what we got going on right now. We got winter and it's never Christmas. But Aslan's not a tame lion, but he is a good lion.
I don't think I'm familiar with that. I was just sitting here thinking about it. So.
You haven't read Chronicles of Narnia?
No, is that a book?
Yeah, C.S. Lewis. You know who he is, right?
No, I don't. I know of Lewis, Merriweather, isn't it?
Oh, no, yeah, Lewis and Clark. No, C.S. Lewis was a famous Christian. Well, he was an atheist, and he became a Christian in the 40s, 50s in England. And he wrote a lot of great books. You know, the Screwtape Letters about a demon writing to his uncle demon on how to deal with Christians. It's kind of a comedy, sarcasm thing, Screwtape Letters. But the Chronicles of Narnia was the big one, and they just turned that into a couple of movies. You know, there's 7 child books that I read in college, children's books, but they're filled with Christian symbolism and just fabulous. And the lion, who's representing Jesus, is Aslan, A-S-L-A-N, and he's the lion of Narnia. So anyway, Narnia is a cursed land, and that's what C.S. Lewis was trying to get across. Same ideas today, that, you know, the world is cursed. It's always winter, but never Christmas. And the whole 7 books of the Chronicles of Narnia deal with the redemption of the world and the redemption of mankind, so just like the Bible.
Well, it's not just the Jews or the Christians that, have an ideal, I guess you would say, of redemption. It seems to be a common trait amongst the biggest part of the majorities around the world, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think Satan is great at copying truth. Like I said before, God creates, Satan copies. And the more copies that are out there, the more you shake your head and go, man, was it Lee Harvey Oswald alone? Or was there two shooters? Was this the FBI? Was it LBJ? I think that's true. I think, Satan just tries to muddle the waters, and it gets so muddied up, people can't figure it out.
I'm not exactly 100% sure that would really be the case. I mean, I wouldn't deny it as a possibility, but there is another case whereas you could be talking about, if you took an orange, for example, here in America, you would call it an orange. Over in Israel, you'd call it something else. In Egypt, you'd probably call it again something else. But everybody would be talking about that same orange, no matter what they called it, in other words.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, are we talking about a situation here where somebody's making false copies? Or are we talking about a situation where everybody just knows it in their own language, in other words?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smart enough to figure that one out. But I guess my point, I can totally agree with that. I think that there's, the stories of creation and the flood and all that kind of stuff, they're definitely universal. My point, I guess, was the part about Jesus being the answer. Sometimes with so many stories out there, so many versions, whether it's, the Presbyterian splitting off or the Lutheran splitting off or the Anglican splitting off or the Catholic Church or whoever, there's so many different things out there. You can cut through all that, which I think is a ploy of Satan to confuse and muddle. You can cut through all that just by cracking open the Bible and asking some questions and being honest. Ask God.
Well, I think I would tend to agree with you. If you crack open your Bible and you start reading that New Testament, you start writing Matthew, the first thing you'll see is Jesus is referred to as the Christ. And any church will tell you that was the Greek word for Messiah, that they both mean anointed or anointing.
Yep, exactly.
The more you read the New Testament, you'll even see where Jesus makes references to this here Christ. And a lot of times he even puts it in format or context by which even before Abraham was, I am.
Yep.
He hadn't been born yet. He couldn't have been referring to Jesus, the man that come out of Mary's womb. He was referring to even before Abraham, there was the anointing of the Holy Spirit, in other words.
Yeah, the pre-existing Christ. No question.
A lot of people, they confuse that, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. And you think about the messianic prophecies. It's amazing. Who could prophesize where they would be born? Bethlehem of Judea, being given up for 30 pieces of silver and, dying without... I forget exactly. I think there's 300 to 600 prophecies about the Christ. And, you can't fulfill where you're born. You have no control over that. You can't control how you're going to die. You have no control over that. It's fun stuff, no question. There's cool stuff in the Bible.
I had a guest on Dr. Marquise on my show at talknowradio.net, I want to say about 3 or 4 months ago. And he was the first person I ever heard on my show comment about the 330 or 360 prophecies of the coming Christ. So the very next day after that show, I decided that sounds like an awful high number. And I've read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and I don't remember seeing that many. Or it sure didn't seem like that many. I mean, it's not like I sat down and counted them one by one.
Yeah, that's true. The number that sticks in my mind is 333. I mean, after the show, I'll send you a link from somewhere. But yeah, there's a ton of prophecies about the Messiah. Not all of them are fulfilled yet.
Another thing I was looking at, though, is some of those prophecies. I went to one of those sites, they had them listed.
Oh.
They could have applied to anything, not just to the coming of Christ.
Yeah, these are pretty specific, I think.
That's what Dr. Marquise said and I went and read those, and they weren't specific. But I didn't go to his link. He didn't give me a link, in other words.
Yeah, I'll send you one. But anyway, my point was, eschatology and prophecy, not just with the end of the world. I mean, there's a lot of predictive stuff that's in the Bible. I think, I'm not going to say for sure. Somebody said once there was 30% of the Bible's prophetic. I'm not sure that's accurate. I can't remember now, but yeah, a lot of it has to do with Jesus and who he is. I mean, that was the proof to the Hebrews, to the Sanhedrin, to the Pharisees, to the ruling Jews, that he was in fact the promised Messiah. You know, it's funny. You know, I've talked with a lot of Jews who aren't Christians and a lot who are, and you know, when I say, why don't you believe this? Like, well, how can a man who is obviously a sinner, all men are sinners, how can a man be God? You know, Emmanuel is Christ, God with us. How can that be? It's not possible. And they're right. Every man is a sinner, so therefore no man could be holy, completely godly, holy. And that's true, unless he's God. Unless, I mean, Jesus could have come back as a kumquat if he wanted to. You know, he could have, anything you want. If you're God, you could be an ant. You can be a man. And like I said before, if you want to communicate to your creation, what's the most logical, unintimidating way to do it is to become what they are. Become a man, become a human. So he was perfectly human and perfectly God. But, you know, whether or not you want to believe that, it's an act of faith. But faith can be based on evidence. And prophecy, especially with the Christ, man, that's some powerful stuff.
Now, I know one of the biggest prophecies that everybody wants to preach about, they say occurred in 1948 when Israel became a state.
Right.
What other ones can you think of that have been fulfilled, say, in anything like modern times?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure that one's actually fulfilled because the word is generation in that reference. I think it's Matthew 24 is the chapter. But generation, is it 40 years? Is it 70 years? What do you consider?
Is it 100 years?
Yeah,
I think a generation would be like my whole lifespan is my generation. My children's lifespan is their generation. I think it's, which would not be a set years because some of your kids lived to be 30, some lived to be 80 or 100.
Yeah, right. And so, you know, to a first century Jew, what is a generation? It's kind of like a cubit, too, you know. What's a cubit? It's not a Bill Cosby line. You know, it's from Genesis. Other prophecies that are relevant that have already come true. Well, obviously, a lot of ones about the Christ have already happened. You know, from the Old Testament for now, yeah, nothing comes to mind that I could say, oh, yeah, that's happened. But that was the big one that everybody's been waiting for, is for Israel to come back to be a nation. And whether a generation is 30, 40, 70, 100, that was the first one that really had to happen before the rest of it can start clicking into place. Now that Israel is in their home boundaries, not completely the biblical territory, but most of it, everything else can start falling into place. But they have to rebuild the temple. And as you probably know, the location of the temple is preoccupied by the dome that the Muslims will not relinquish without a fight. So
that means they're going to have to be a big war to get them to relinquish it, and that'll probably be World War III right there when it happens.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty close. I mean, you know, the Arab nations are surrounding Israel, and they're every day getting more and more ticked off. So keep your eye on the apple of God's eye for the next big fulfillments, I'd say.
Okay, now a show we're going to have about somewhere between 2 to 4 minutes or so before the break time music that ends this here show, and you know, as the herald for the next show, I guess you could say, starts. Do you have any last minute thoughts?
Well, I mean, the reason you had me on was to talk about my book and my writing, so I would hope that folks would check out Xposure, and I hope they like it as much as you do. I appreciate the endorsement. Very kind of you to say so many nice things about my writing. But no, I guess not. I mean, I think, you know, the whole idea of mankind, we're obviously spiritual. We have a spiritual inclination. And I think from a biblical perspective, my experience has been there's Satan and there's God. And one of them is trying to tell you the truth, and the other one is trying to stop you. So figuring out how to interpret correctly God's message to you, which supposedly for the last 2,000 years is the scripture, is where you start. If you want to know what's true, you want to cut through the chase, get through all the muddy stuff of, you know, the grassy knoll, is it true or not true? Start with the source. Don't look at Christians. Don't look at churches. We're all going to let you down. Go right to the scripture and look and see who Jesus was and what he said. And I think the evidence is overwhelming. He's alive.
All righty then. With that little note, I want to once again remind everybody, if you want to learn more about today's guest, you can go to my website and click down to his picture and his description here and go to his website, www.totallyrighteous.com, which is spelt right like you write with a pen. And once again, I'm going to copy that and put it in the chat room for you folks right here. Okay.
You're multitasking, I can tell.
Well, I kind of got tongue in a little bit of a bad position there, and I do apologize for that, folks.
But I want to thank you for having me, Royce.
And there it is in the chat room. I want to thank you, folks. And I want to apologize to my guests and my listeners. It just so happened right when I was going for that there link, my little chihuahua come up to me where I'm sitting here in front of my computer and started climbing on my legs and scratching them, and I'm wearing shorts, and it kind of hurt, and I was trying to get her off of me while I was talking, so I am sorry about that.
Nobody knew that. Now we all know.
Well, I know. I kind of felt like I owed it since I started faltering there at the very end.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. It was great. I really appreciate it, and I love meeting you.
I really enjoyed having you here, and I'll be in touch with you. I'll be sending you a link to where it's archived at YouTube and my site sometime over the weekend, probably.
Great. Thanks, sir.
All right, and folks, thank you very much for listening. I'm going to go ahead and let the guests go. And, Philip, I'll be in touch with you later. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
Okay. And, everybody, don't forget my website's www.talknowradio.net. I hear the music starting. That's my sign that we are through, so I'm going to sign out. Y'all have a good weekend, and come see me this coming Saturday at my site. And I don't have time to go down to the guest name right now. I just ran out. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
These guys are hammers. And to hammers, everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, and we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. What good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor. And she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared